So Macklemore's Wings, talking about how much it costs to live in consumer society. Where does this come from? This idea that money is more important than people, things are more important than people. Well, here's the history of the global system. We've had the history of colonialism, but now we're getting down to you personally in your life, what you do. And this is a story of commodity capitalism, production, distribution, and consumption. So it starts out with a political assumption of autonomous individuals. This is John Locke. Let's do the preamble to the Constitution. If you look at the preamble to the Constitution, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. This is the founding assumption of the United States, is that individuals are autonomous and they came together at some point. Primitive man came together. Basically, you had one guy over here on this primordial plane, and he belongs to a nuclear family. He's got a wife and children back behind him with his stuff. And then you've got another primordial man on a primordial plane. He's over there with his wife and his kids and their stuff. And they see each other and they say, hi, hi. I'm an individual. I'm an individual. Let's come together and talk. And so they come together, and this one says, I have issues back there with wild animals and roving brigands trying to attack me and steal my stuff. And this guy says, that's funny. I have the same problem back over there. Let's join together and provide for the common defense and promote the general welfare and ensure the blessings of tranquility, all that stuff, right? That is where society comes from, according to John Locke, according to the assumptions, the assumptions of the 18th century founders of our country, is that society comes about from autonomous individuals seeing one another and recognizing strangers and saying, I want to be friends with you, and form society. And prior to that, we were autonomous individuals. That's nonsense, right? We've just got through all this study of indigenous people, of hunter-gatherer societies, of chimpanzees and baboons and others already living fully embedded in social lives, in social communities. That band society is everyone is related to everyone else, and so if you had two people in 100,000 years ago seeing each other on a primordial plane, they would say, "Hey, Bob, it's been a couple of years. Hey, how you doing?" It's their cousins, right? Everyone knows everyone. It's not like there's a strangers meeting in a field. No, everyone knows each other, and everyone is sort of on the same page. And there's no such thing as an autonomous individual, right? I mean, seriously, come on. It's nonsense. He came up with it. He just thought, wow, this has to be how society is. So Marx comes along, 100 years later, a couple hundred years later, and says, this idea that primitive man is an isolated individual who makes a conscious choice to join society, this is nonsense. This doesn't jive with Marx as well. So Marx is trying to say, where did Locke get it from? This idea of isolated individuals. And Marx says, look closely. Okay, so the kind of economics that Locke was looking at was Neoclassical Economics. It was mercantile capitalism of the 18th century, which did not involve much mechanization. Economies were not industrialized. This is the economy of the what do we call it? The silk trade, the Silk Road. Here we go, Silk Road. If you look at the Silk Road, you've got people over here in oh goodness, it's not going to be good. Open image, and new tab, and now we've got here we go. Here's our map. We've got China at one end and Europe at the other. So you've got the silk coming out of here, and you're getting it either overland through Samarkand or through the water, through Aden, and it ends up in Europe. Down here, they've got loads and loads of silk and not many people wanting to buy it. Over here, they've got very little silk and tons of people needing to buy it. So you've got a high supply, low demand, low prices. and you've got low supply, high demand, high prices. So all you have to do is buy low over here and sell high over there, and then subtract the cost of transportation, and boom, you've got profit. So that is what we call arbitrage, buying low and selling high. The focus of neoclassical economics was on distribution. The increased value, the profit or the surplus, comes from trade, from buying low in one place and selling high in another place. This is called arbitrage. Okay, so Marx tosses that out the window. He's like, what I have seen since 1815 in England is not this, right? He's writing in the 40s, 1840s, 1850s, writing about his version of economics, which is production-based, not distribution-based. So his perspective is what he invents. He invents a whole new field of economics called Marxist Economics, and it's production oriented. He looks at workers and capitalists. He looks at the proletariat, what he calls the proletariat, the people who are working in the factories, and the bourgeoisie, the people who own the factories. And he finds that the increased value, that is the profit or the surplus, comes from the surplus labor of the proletariat within the production process. Now, you may know this already because you may have a job. In fact, you very likely have a job. And you probably get paid, if you get paid $10, $12, $15 an hour, what do you think your labor is worth to your employer? Do you think that your labor is worth more to your employer than what they pay you, or less? If you get paid $10 an hour, are you providing services to your employer that are worth $15 an hour or $20 an hour? Or are you providing less? Are you providing like $5 or $8 an hour worth of service to your employer? And remember, it's hard. It's easy to do this if you're a production worker on the line and you're producing widgets per hour, and you know what the cost of those widgets is wholesale to the distributor. But it's harder if you work the counter at Walgreens. You do know probably. I mean, you just ask your manager, what's our gross per year, what's our net per year? $100 million or something like that gross, and maybe a couple $1 million in net. Who knows? But you can figure out daily what they make in profit in that store, and then you can say, well, they wouldn't have made that profit if I hadn't been here to punch the buttons and scan the items and take their money. And so you can figure out what you're worth from that. How many people are working in the store per profit per day per person. In any case, so the short answer is, if you are making less, if you're making more than what your the value of your labor is to your employer, you're probably going to get fired, because nobody has time to do that, to pay people to work for them. They got to get paid. So the rule of thumb is you are worth more to your employer than your salary represents. And that is what Marx is talking about. He's talking about that difference between what you're getting paid and what you're making for them. And he calls that surplus labor value within the production process. He says that's where the actual profit is coming from. It's not coming from arbitrage anymore. It's all about labor. So how does this work? Under industrial capitalism, workers sell their labor to the factory owner. That's what we own. Remember, we are cotters, so we only own our labor power, and we're trying to make it worth more through education, through the capital investment. So we sell our labor to the factory owner. We give them our labor. We say, I will spend 8 hours being your slave, and whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to try to do it the best I can. Conscious and attentive service within your building. And that enables the productions of goods. This is a very simplified version, but I apparently teach this a lot. Here, let's make it big again. So the first thing we have is we have a factory. We've got an owner here. I'm going to put it over to the one side in case this is off-centered again. We've got C. C is the capitalist. The capitalist has money, and they use that money to build the factory. This is the factory is here. They also use that money to hire workers. You can see money going out to hire W. Those are workers. And you also have money going out to pay for raw materials, giving the workers something to do in that factory. So they paid for the factory, then they paid the payroll for the workers, and then they paid the suppliers for the raw materials. That's RM, raw material over here. and the result of that is a product. And so the circles are people and the squares are things. But even after they pay that, they don't have anything to show for it. When you own a factory and you hire a bunch of workers and you pay for a bunch of raw materials, what happens is you get stuck with a bunch of stuff. You get stuck with DeLorean cars that nobody wants and that are terribly, terribly expensive and underpowered. And we'll come back to DeLoreans shortly.